Hello, friends and enemies, and welcome back to the channel. I am your super fluffy host, and I shall be continuing the story that I had been telling. Part 2 of my first ever time GMing a game of D&D. Be sure to check out the first part, of course. It'll be linked down below. And of course, check out the very first game of D&D I ever played, which will also be linked down below. Not really needed to know what's going on in these two, just kind of helpful. Anyway, with that out of the way, so the party's back in the major hub city. They start exploring it and notice, weirdly, there's no one around. This place that had, like, thousands upon thousands of people is completely empty. Not only that, but a bunch of the doors are locked. And even when they can get a door open, sometimes it just leads to nothingness. This is incredibly bizarre. Naturally, Stu wants to loot all of the shops, but they're all either there's no doorway in, or it leads to nothingness, which kind of upsets him a little bit. But, they're going through town, and he decides, wait a second, I'm going to check out the main guard area. Because apparently, he thought that he could get some magical loot there. And so he heads off alone with his 3 characters. And I start thinking, all right, what can I give him? Got to give him something. And then boom, it hits me. So I come up with this item, a magical amulet that he finds inside the main guard building, inside the captain's quarters. He also finds that everything in here is old and rusted. Like, he finally finds some suits of armor and weapons, but they're all rusted, decayed, etc. In fact, a lot of the items in there are even like seats, beds, etc. They're all weirdly decayed. He finds a note that's slightly legible that notes that the city has been evacuated and that they're going to try to move on to the capital because the magical wards have failed. Which is kind of bizarre. And looking at it, he realized that it's been years, according to this note. Well, or not, it wasn't years, but it had been a while since they left when this happened. So he takes the amulet, which opens up as a locket with there being nothing inside. Meanwhile, I'm trying to get Druid interested again, so I say that his wolf smells something and lets him know that there's actually someone nearby. Druid does get a little bit interested, and him and the NPCs check it out and find a cat girl, a furry. I had no idea what furries were at this point. I had just seen some animes and video games and stuff, and I was like, you know what? I'm putting a cat girl in the game, and that's going to be linked to this magical amulet. And so that's what I did. They found a cat girl, and Druid actually started to talk with her a little bit, and then Stu showed up. So Stu showed up, which is he didn't really have any response to the cat girl. He's like, okay. And was disappointed that she didn't have any loot. She's basically just wearing some rags. They tried to question her with what was happening, but cat girl knows the locket, amulet, whatever, and warned them that that was what had happened. That locket has been what transferred her from a normal human into a cat girl. So they ask her what was going on with it. And she tells the story of what had happened with the town as well. That basically one day they started rounding everyone up, telling them to evacuate the city, that it was going to fall soon. So she had gotten in line with everybody trying to escape when her pet cat had escaped from her. She ran off chasing it down, and when she found it, it was dead. She didn't know what happened to it. It was just laying there dead. So she mourned her cats a little bit, picked him up thinking that maybe she could bury him on the side of the road or something after they left. Or maybe there's time to bury him. But when she got back to the main gate, it was closed and sealed. There's no one around. She tried to get the gate open, but couldn't. And so finally decided, after searching around a bit, seeing, maybe there's a guard around. Maybe there's someone else around. Maybe she could get out through the other entrance. And realizing that she couldn't, she decided to just bury her cat. So she went home, went into her backyard, and started to bury her cat when she found the amulet. Since it was a locket, she decided to keep some of her old dead cat's fur as a memento, I guess. But when she had put it in the locket, closed it, and put the locket on, she was suddenly transformed. Like she gained ears and a tail. And then as she wore it longer, it transformed her more into the cat girl that they had found. She had found a book that actually described it as a cursed item that would slowly transform whoever wore it into an animal, based on whatever animal, animal's fur, feather, whatever that they had put in there. But while it did so, it did grant them a boon of like strength or dexterity or etc. But despite being cursed, you could just take it off and end the transformation. But whatever item was inside would forever be lost. So that's what she did. Upon hearing this, Stu asked what kind of animals are in the back of the cart. I say that there's a cat, dog, rat, like a bird or something. He immediately grabs the bird, kills it, stuffs the feathers into the locket and puts it on, and says, "Okay, do I have wings now?" Druid's gone. He's completely checked out. He's not gone. He's still there. He no longer interacts at all. He barely rolls dice now. I think I should have asked him if he wanted to quit. I tried to get him involved a little bit more. Had the cat girl talk with his wolf, the wolf talk with her, then try to talk with him, but he would just he wasn't there anymore, basically. He at least still rolled dice, I guess. Like I said, I feel bad for him. He obviously wanted to try to get into D&D. He at times seemed to have a little bit of fun, but Stu and me not shutting down Stu, yeah. But anyway, I told Stu no, he didn't grow wings. He had just started his hair turned to feathers. And the cat girl reminded him that it took a while. So they start to head out when they realize that the merchant's gone. The NPC point out that the merchant had left shortly after finding the cat girl because he needed to go find something, like back at his home or at the merchant headquarters or something. But they notice that this darkness is slowly spreading everywhere. Like the path that they had come down, they can't see it anymore. So Stu decides, you know what? Screw the merchant. This is our cart now. We're leaving. And so it's either follow Stu or be left behind, so naturally all the NPCs leave, leaving this poor random NPC merchant to be consumed by whatever darkness is spreading through the city. They leave the town, having to unlock the other gate, open it, and leave, and then head out. At this point, they left the area of the town, and if they had actually been looking, they would notice that the sun had turned back to normal. At this point, they could have turned around and walked right back into the city, and it would have been the normal city. It was just the bizarre, ever-changing landscape, because nobody actually had realized how far this changing landscape had spread from that forest. So if they had just turned around, they could have walked right back into the city. But naturally, they didn't. They knew of a nearby town they could go to that might help them get answers. They had a random encounter on the way there. Some wolves attack them. Nothing too exciting. When they get to town, and they actually find out that there is I want to say it's a power plant. It was basically a power plant that was producing magical energy that could slowly, like, effectively, it could turn into like turn everything modern day, only powered by magic. But for some weird reason, the plant was producing power, but none of it could be used. It was all going somewhere. And so they got a quest to take an airship to this island nation that had built the power stations, where the main one was, because they hadn't been able to get any communication over there. So the party agrees, but first, Stu demands that the party just sort of stay here until he gets his wings. Which, after a while, he finally gets his wings, though he's starting to turn more into a bird person. Which he doesn't care. He's got wings now. He can fly. That's all he cares about. So he gets his wings. They get on the airship and they start to travel. He insists that they bring this cart that they stole with them. And, like, this airship has other supplies and stuff, but he just throws them off just so they can bring their cart. Definitely should have shut it down, but I was like, you know what? I want to keep this going, because I've actually got some pretty interesting ideas, I have ideas, at least, for how this is going to go, involving these power stations. So I'm like, okay, you know what? Yep, you toss out all these supplies and stuff, you load your cart on, and you take off. They spend a day traveling by airship when the whole thing explodes. Some kind of magical missile, and I don't mean the spell magic missile, I mean like a Tomahawk cruise missile comes flying through the air and hits the airship and explodes it. Only as a magical Tomahawk cruise missile. You know, fantasy. Airship explodes, the captain is killed, and they have to make some pretty tough rolls to not die, which they all pass on. They probably weren't that tough, but you know, I didn't want to kill the party again. So they succeed the rolls, but now they're basically floating in the ocean, or sea at least. And Stu is extremely upset because his cart was blown up in this whole thing. And now he wants to get revenge on whatever had happened. So he flies up into the air and gets hit by a missile, which knocks him out of the air. He flies up into the air again, gets hit by another missile. He does it again. And he's slowly killing himself with these missiles. And I say, you know what? If you're not careful, because you're taking so much damage, it could blow your wings off, because they are new and kind of weak. He decides to stop flying. He doesn't want to lose his wings. So they're floating in the water, trying to figure out what to do, when a boat comes sailing up. I say it's a patrol ship from the small nation. It saw what was happening and it's come over to rescue them. They're brought aboard this Navy vessel or whatever. Someone calls for a medic to come help everybody. Everything seems to be going okay. And then Stu pulls out his weapons. They want to take over the boat. I look at Druid, say, are you going to help him? He barely looks up, says no, goes back to what he was doing. And I say, okay, your party isn't going to help, so it's just going to be you. You've been hit by 5 missiles and have 3 HP left, I think it was. Oh, and there's 30 or 40 people on this ship armed and ready to fight you. What do you do? He says, all right, I guess I don't fight them. I say, okay, well, having already threatened them, they're going to ask you to hand over your weapons because now they don't really trust you. The NPCs and the Druid hand over their weapons. Stu says no. He says, I take my weapons out, my characters slit their wrist, jump into the ocean, and then flip off all of the NPCs as they sink into the ocean. I sort of stare at him for a second, shrug and say, alright, your characters are dead, so you're going to need to roll up new characters. And he says no, grabs his books, shoves them into his bag, grabs his character sheet, shoves them into his bag, grabs his dice, doesn't say anything after that, no, and then just leaves. And we're left sitting there. Well, I'm left sitting there because after this, Druid gets up and leaves. He doesn't care about his character sheets, and he just leaves. And that leaves me sitting there. I'm like, okay. Well, I guess there won't be another game. I'm sort of talking to myself at this point. I'm like, there won't be another game. And I guess an epilogue for this game. And then I just sort of go over, here's what could have happened had the adventure continued on. And sort of ramble on to myself for a couple of minutes. Probably seemed a little bit insane. But yeah. And that was that. I talked to Stu a few more times. Never talked to Druid again. I never really saw him again. Talked to Stu once or twice after that. But basically just found the group of friends I had and just started going back to hanging out with them at lunch. I did actually talk to a person who was GMing a 3rd edition campaign that Stu was in. And apparently this was just their games. Like Murder Hobo 101. Or Central, I guess, whatever you want to say it. That was basically all they did. And apparently Stu only ever played the same exact 2 characters in every single game he ever played. And yeah, it would be years again before I played a D&D again. Or any tabletop game for that matter. But that will be a story for another time. And so I hope you all enjoyed this tale of my first ever time GMing D&D and how horrible it was. If you did enjoy it, then of course be sure to like the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel. And with that, I shall see you all later.